For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, Capitol Bureau Chief and host of Under the Dome, and you're listening to our latest episode for the week of December 11th, 2023. Today I'm here with higher education reporter Korie Dean and Makiya Seminera, who was our politics intern this past summer. You'll recognize her voice from a few episodes of the podcast a few months ago, and she is now a McClatchy Southeast Region real-time reporter. So Korie and Makiya are on this week to talk about some things we've talked about before about higher ed and politics crossover. And this is a big one. You all have been working for a long time on a project that's now published, newsobserver.com or observer.com if you're in the Charlotte area, about kind of political influence in higher education and what that means on the ground at UNC, but how that compares to Florida. And you know a little bit more about Florida, Makiya. So I guess my first question is for you on how this came about and why Florida is the state that you all decided to compare North Carolina to.
Yeah, so I mean, for those who don't know, I am from Florida. I've lived in Florida the past 22 years of my life. And I think, talking to Korie and just kind of seeing what Korie was reporting on, there's a lot of things where you see it and you're like, oh, this happened in Florida 1 or 2 years ago. And we just kind of talked through some big examples like the Civic Center at UNC, also being at UF, controversy around presidential searches, things of that nature. And we saw, those similarities, and we got together and we were like, we should do a project on this, just because it seemed like there was a lot going on that had already happened in Florida and was now kind of, working its way through in North Carolina.
So the publication timing, which worked out perfectly, really, this past week with the news about UNC Chapel Hill Chancellor Kevin Guskiewicz, as we record this, they need to flip a final switch for it all to go together. But basically, Guskiewicz is leaving for Michigan State, not Michigan State, for those that would parse out that difference between the two schools. So Governor Cooper put out a statement saying that legislative interference is essentially driving people away. His statement on Thursday was, as the nation's leading public university, UNC attracts worldwide leaders to the office of chancellor, but meddling from legislative appointees is driving them away, Cooper said, because the GOP legislature seized university trustee appointments and installed hard right appointees on the UNC Board of Governors. Our reputation is beginning to suffer. And then Cooper goes on to say, and here's this report from the Governor's Commission on the Governance of Public Universities in North Carolina that he commissioned this summer. So obviously that's the Democratic governor's take on what this all means with interference, but it's more than just Guskiewicz, it's different things. And how, Korie, do you think that it's been the past few years changed, just a general trend on the General Assembly getting involved in higher ed? I think you have a comment from one person in y'all's stories that says, well, this is just how it is because it's public, but it's what's been going on recently.
Yeah, I mean, I think this can kind of be one interesting difference between Florida and North Carolina is that in North Carolina, it does seem that this has kind of been a much slower buildup. Ron DeSantis became governor of Florida, I think, in 2018. Yeah. So a lot of these changes in higher ed, targeting like diversity efforts and things like that have really ramped up since 2018, even since 2020. But in North Carolina, you can trace a lot of those similar things that are now happening back even to like 2010 when Republicans gained control of the General Assembly. They then got to make appointments to university governing boards. They've consolidated those appointments among themselves, among the Board of Governors, which is also appointed by the legislature. And so I do think it's been slower here, but has definitely stemmed from those things and maybe has ramped up in recent years. I mean, I think, again, like Makiya said, things that have happened in Florida, there was a ban this session in North Carolina on compelled speech in university hiring and admissions, but a similar bill had passed in Florida a year or two ago. So I do think while it has been a slower buildup, some of those more concrete examples that we saw, of comparisons between Florida and North Carolina have ramped up, I would say, in the past 3-4 years or so.
So if these are Republican-led efforts for the legislature, why is there something that they need to, why are they looking for a change to how things have maybe been recently? What have you seen in North Carolina and Florida? DeSantis obviously is a more of a nationally known figure, I think. I mean, he's running for president and was already pretty well known before that. So what is it around the diversity, equity, and inclusion? And so they want to legislate changes that way. Is tenure like a Republican priority, or just like like the past couple of years of something that that lawmakers have been listening or that have wanted to do something about, like to change? Or
I think there are several different issues. I mean, definitely we did see similarities between DEI policies in North Carolina and Florida. I would say Florida has been a bit more extreme on that than North Carolina has been so far. On tenure in North Carolina, there was a bill this session that it died basically in committee that would have banned tenure for any prospective faculty, which was a more extreme measure than Florida had considered. Florida actually adopted a very similar post-tenure review process to North Carolina, so that was one way that the ideas maybe flowed the opposite way of from going North Carolina to Florida. But I don't know. I mean, I talked to former UNC Chancellor Holden Thorpe, who was chancellor 2 chancellors ago before Kevin Guskowitz, and he talked about the idea of higher ed becoming more politically useful over the past few years. Things like Ron DeSantis wanting to target woke policies, which, you know, are pretty clearly he's tying that to DEI. It's become a more salient political talking point, I think, over the past few years.
is it more of an impact on the faculty, or they don't like what the classes that are offered? And then correct me if I'm wrong, but the best way to describe tenure, I guess, it's sort of job security. If somebody wants tenure, they have to go through a bunch of hoops to get it. And that would potentially be a draw for a job, right? That if you want to go and you've put your time in, that you work for tenure, and is that right? Or and what would eliminating that do? I mean, obviously not all professorships are tenured.
I mean, I think the clear impact is that if, you know, targeting tenure does affect faculty. I mean, it would affect recruitment because it's not just about job security, it's about academic freedom and being able to teach topics that might be controversial or, you know, might, you know, maybe your university governing boards don't agree with, but you know, with tenure, you still have the right to teach those topics. So I think it would, when you talk about, you know, banning or eliminating tenure, that would definitely affect faculty recruitment and retention.
Yeah, and I think when you look at bills like Stop Woke, which happened in Florida, I believe 2 years ago now, you see this kind of chilling effect on faculty where they don't know what they can say in classrooms, you know, without getting in trouble. When you talk about things like race or gender, and faculty who don't have certain protections against them might opt out to not even kind of touch on those topics because of the legislation.
Korie had mentioned the phrase compelled speech, which has come up at the university level, and then also state employees. And it's pretty similar to sort of the anti-CRT language in a bill that didn't become law looking at K-12. And they just kind of went to a larger age group as far as what you can talk about in your workplace. We need to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what the next UNC chancellor is going to face, and then our picks for headliner of the week, and a little update within the headliner on the latest in candidate filing. We'll be right back. You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with reporters Makiya Seminera and Korie Dean. For the break, we were talking about comparing North Carolina to Florida and higher education, public education, and how politics is at play and all of that. At the top of the show, we also talked about what Democratic Governor Roy Cooper said about it, and I quoted him where he was talking about them driving away. So now that UNC is looking for, pretty soon here, a new chancellor, what's that new chancellor coming into? Makiya, what are they coming into? What's the climate in North Carolina, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you know, from what we saw in our project, talking to different faculty who have left UNC in recent years for a wide variety of different reasons, but a lot of them did acknowledge kind of an increasingly more hostile political climate for them in higher education. So I think just kind of looking at from everyone that we spoke to, the next chancellor is going to have to, maybe address or just kind of be aware of those situations where faculty kind of feel that they have been, maybe pushed too much or, just kind of, I guess, nervous about what future legislation is going to be coming for higher education.
Korie, what I assume the pay is good. So, like, what is somebody walking into? Why would they want to be chancellor? And what do you already know that the faculty are expecting from that person?
Yeah, I mean, I think even with everything that Makiya and I wrote about and kind of this path or track that North Carolina higher ed has been on, seems like it will continue to be on. I mean, I do think North Carolina has a strong higher education system, especially publicly. I mean, we have, 16 public universities, UNC being the first public university in the country. I do think UNC has historically been a kind of a destination job for higher ed leaders. I do think this search will kind of show whether it still is with all of these political developments going on. And it will be interesting to see whether the next chancellor comes from academia or if they pick someone from the business world or another industry. That is a trend in higher ed nationally. I spoke to the faculty chair at UNC and she was a bit cautious about a chancellor who would not have higher ed experience. Not that it's impossible, but it's certainly kind of its own world in academia and higher ed that it would probably be difficult, especially at a place like UNC that is so nationally recognizable, to kind of walk into that job assuming that it would be a walk in the park or an easy stroll. I think, someone without higher ed experience might find that difficult. I don't know. I am not in the market for the job. I do not envy the next person who has it, but I think it'll be interesting to see kind of what type of person lands in the job.
Where are students at play in all of this? Is it that they see with faculty and staff, it's, ultimately their boss and sets the tone of their workplace. But for the students, it's more of it that they're the symbol of the university. Where do you see that as far as how who a chancellor is affects the students?
I think they do affect the students. I mean, I went to UNC. I had Carol Folt as a chancellor and then was there when Kevin Guskowitz stepped into the role as well. And obviously I think faculty probably do look at that person really more as their boss, as their, academic professional leader. I think students kind of want someone who's fun in a way. I think that is an important trait, but students also pay attention to politics. Students also pay attention to the several national scandals or controversies that UNC has been involved in over the past several years. And they see UNC on the national nightly news or, whatever. And I think they want someone who can kind of be a strong face in all of that and feel like they're not just kind of like set out to sink or swim in a way.
And I will say on that point, coming from UF, where a former US senator became the university's president, you saw a lot of student pushback. That was kind of the majority of who was kind of out there pushing back against that presidential search and the outcome of that. So, I think students really do pay attention to that. And, if they don't like the choices that the university makes, if there is precedent from Florida, they'll make their voices known on that.
All right. Moving on to other news of this past week. In the week as you're listening to this, it's the second and final, unless some litigation we're not aware of changes things, of candidate filing. And candidate filing time is always a little more interesting than all like the long months of somebody announcing they're going to run or retire, because then when it comes down to make a decision, things change. We talked about last week that Erin Paré, who's a Republican state House member, is going to run for Congress. Now, she's not running for Congress. She's going to run for her House seat again. What we learned with filing opening up is that Representative Marvin Lucas, a Cumberland County Democrat, who is a longtime lawmaker, former principal, sits close to the press corner, so we see him more than usual on the floor. He is retiring, as is Kelly Alexander from Mecklenburg County, longtime well-known lawmaker. Rosa Gill, closer to home here in the Triangle, is not going to run again. She's also a Democrat. And on the Republican side, in the other chamber, Senator Joyce Krovic is not running again, and she has been a force for her caucus for a while now. One person that some people want to come back, and among them is Elmer Floyd in the House side, filed to run. And if y'all that have been at the legislative building for a few years remember when he was there the session before this passed, he would always ask at the end of each day session, what time they needed to be here. And it was kind of a running joke on the floor where Moore would tell him, when to come to work. So anyway, we'll move on to our picks for headliner of the week. Mine is also related to candidate filing, so I'll go first. Patrick McHenry of Bow Ties and Gavel Bangs is leaving the U.S. House and going into the private sector. I don't think he's announced, well, we think he's going in the private sector, what he's actually going to do yet. Maybe by the time you all are listening to this, his plans will be public. And he opened the floodgates in that Republican primary. It's a Republican district with a lot of different names floated, including state lawmakers. And so really at the end of Friday, people need to make a decision on what they're doing. They're probably all waiting until the last possible moment because you don't want to put your name in and then find out the one person who could beat you is ads later and you're already in there. So we'll see how that goes. Makiya, who or what is your headliner of the week?
Yeah, so my headliner of the week is food related, and I'm going with Cosmix, which is a spin-off restaurant chain from McDonald's. They announced this yesterday. They're opening up a new location, I believe, this weekend in Illinois, and then they'll also be opening up in Texas. But it's a beverage-led chain, so it's kind of like just a bunch of different drinks like coffees and slushes and all of these different very vibrant and brightly colored drinks.
Called Cosmix. Is it like space?
Yeah, no, it's a space
okay.
theme. It's actually it's inspired by this like fringe alien character in the McDonald's universe that like just appeared in a couple like 90s commercials and then he never came back.
McDonald and Friends in the story of Cosmic. One day, a strange object landed in McDonald Land.
Look! A silver flower pot! Oh, that's no flower pot, Grimace.
Who's there? Hi-ho, Earth people. Cosmic here. I popped in from outer space on a trade mission.
But he's back now in the form of Cosmic.
Okay,
They were playing the long game on that guy.
Yeah, they really did. But I do love a sweet treat, so I hope it, is successful and it comes to North Carolina so I could try it.
Okay, Korie, what's your headliner of the week?
Well, we've talked a lot about UNC today. I'm a Tar Heel, and I will say I'm very impressed with the way UNC basketball has been playing lately. I feel like after a couple of rough years, we need a good season, and
You want some live action out there?
I do need some live action, and yeah, I'm feeling good about this team. We had a great win over Tennessee. We did lose to UConn, but they showed great heart and determination. So, yeah, go Heels.
Go Hokies, go Duke. All right. And then go
Gators.
Gators.
Go Gators.
All right, this ends our politics podcast with some sports and food. I'm Dawn Vaughan for Makiya, Seminera, and Korie Dean. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.